first of all, we're going to talk about how to build a horror scenario, and we're going to build one together. But initially, I'm going to talk a little bit about ways to make a horror scenario better, more believable, more fun for your players. Okay, and I'm assuming here that y'all are playing D&D or Pathfinder or some fantasy system. Okay, that's fine. If you want to play, if you're a Call of Cthulhu player, obviously I love you. There's information in that already. Plus, I have a video online last year when I did the same seminar about for Call of Cthulhu. So, there is a author whose name is M.R. James. It's not Mr. James, it's Montague Rhodes. And he is H.P. Lovecraft's favorite ghost story writer. He wrote amazing ghost stories with skinny, bony, physical ghosts that are just fabulous. And some of them have made into short films by the BBC or elsewhere, but they're terrific. Actually, one's made into a movie. If you've ever seen the movie, what's the name of the movie? The one that's based on, where the guy says that the devil's trying to get him, he won't believe it.
Night of the Demon?
Curse of the Demon, Night of the Demon. Yeah. That's the M.R. James story. But regardless, Lovecraft loves him. And to his credit, M.R. James wrote an essay about how to write a scary story. Now he's doing ghost stories and he has 3 rules. And these 3 rules usefully function for role-playing games. So, one of the rules is the monster must be malign. There's a lot of ghost stories in the day where the ghost really all it wanted was for you to find his body or tell you where the treasure was or something dumb, clear his name. And the says, no, the monster's got to be evil. Okay? Now, if you're playing Call of Cthulhu, it's not a problem. In D&D, you can probably find someone who's blind enough, but you don't want an enemy who's just there, who isn't really bad, because then once the players find out it's bad, even if it was scary earlier, they're kind of like, oh, it's not bad. I guess it kind of removes the fear you had early on in the show. Or the thing. So the guy's got to be malign. He doesn't have. That doesn't mean he must want to kill every single person in the world. He might only be malign because he must exterminate the Johansson family line, or whatever it is he wants. It's okay to have a focused malignity, but it's got to be a bad guy. Don't be tempted to say, "Oh, the Archlich is just misunderstood." You know, really all he wanted was to raise puppets. You know, I don't say that's kind of exaggeration, but we've all seen people do it. To have an evil villain that isn't actually evil. One interesting ways of doing it. Has anyone seen the movie Blackula?
Yeah.
Okay, so in the movie Blackula is kind of a tragic figure, right? He didn't want to be a vampire. I mean, Dracula does it because Dracula is a huge, colossal prick. And turns him into a vampire, and he comes out, and he's kind of, and he falls in love with a girl, and Blackula starts. But the fact is, in Blackula, he's got to be destroyed. He's spreading vampires everywhere and getting more and more of them. He's killing people, and he may not mean to be a bad guy. But boy, is he malign, right? If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. And it's also I mean, it's a terrible name, right? But the actor is William Marshall, who's this great Shakespearean actor, and has a wonderful voice. I mean, it's like Christopher Lee level voice. So. It's a lot better than you expect from a movie called Blackula. So he's got a guy who is misunderstood and has a tragic backstory and all that, but he is evil and his existence makes there be more evil, and the vampires are spreading like zombies in Blackula, you know? And in the final battle scene, he's killing cops left and right. Anyway, so monsters malign. Got it? Good. Rule number 2. Don't use jargon. Now, M.R. James, of course, meant don't talk about like vibrations or past lives or something. But in gaming terms, one of the things that we all have going for us is that we are using a game, and games have rules. And I know there's games that are trying to be systems or isolates or whatever, but the point of the rules is so you can answer questions in the game, like where is the elephant? Who is nearest to the glass window? You know, there's a reason for the rules, that they serve a purpose, okay? But what you don't want people to do is be focused on the rules instead of on what's happening. So, for example, if the monster is attacking you can usually do this. The players know the rules. You put it in the back. You can say, instead of saying the monster rolls a 17 and he hits you for 7 damage, you would just roll your attack and say the monster swipes at you. Then you roll the damage. He says he rips open your shoulder, take 7 points. Then the focus is on the injured shoulder, not on the fact it was 7 points. Then later on in the adventure, maybe he's doing something, he fails some roll or something, and you say, oh, it must be because your shoulder was hurt. And he goes, oh yeah, that makes sense. And he's thinking about the injury, okay, instead of about the rules. What so focus on what's the rules are trying to represent something in the real world. Well, you have to use the rules to understand. You need to tell the guy he's got 7 points of damage, but focus on the real world event first, and then go in with the and what it means in game terms. So they're thinking about the real world. And like I said, it's okay for that real world event to have other effects. Like you can say, well, you're going to climb that ladder slower because the monster tore open your shoulder. And the player, a reasonable player, which hopefully you all have, will go, oh yeah, that makes sense. I'll, maybe I'll try something, and you get your idea, okay? So don't use jargon. In this case, it's game jargon. The monster doesn't drain an energy level. But the monster, its enervating touch sucks part of your soul out, and you lost a life level, right? First is the effect. Second is the rules. Okay.
Sandy, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So when M.R. James wrote this, there was no D&D. What was the jargon he was worried about? Yeah. Madame
Blavatsky, like vibrations and past lives and sensing auras and like new. I mean, sadly, he's writing this in 1925, and yet the New Age stuff is exactly the same now. I'm not saying New Age is bad. I'm saying it's not good in a ghost story. Okay. You bring in the medium to detect the ghost. Can be effective if the medium gets his butt kicked, okay, or is destroyed or something. It's not effective if the medium contacts the ghost and finds it, it just wants you to find his money. Okay, so that's what he was doing. Okay, the movie City of the Walking Dead by Lucy Fulci has an especially effective mediumistic sequence, I feel. It takes place in Dunwich, actually. And they have a seance, and it is a hair raiser. I mean, there's maggots flying through the windows, and there are people dying. And okay, so third rule: set your adventure in a place where your readers can reasonably imagine themselves to be. Okay? Let me give you an example. Probably most of you have seen the movie Alien. Okay? Now, Alien is aboard a spaceship where a few of us will ever be. But this spaceship is dingy, and there's condensing water, and there's chains hanging, and it's like this rundown tramp ship. And the people aboard it seem like real people. They're bitching about their pay. They're doing things that seems like, man, if I was on a spaceship, this is the kind of spaceship I'd be stuck with. And so it seems like a real place. It comes alive for them. Imagine instead you had the same story of Alien, but it was aboard the Starship Enterprise. None of us are going to be on that ship. Everything's plastic and clean and works, and it's really nice. It doesn't seem like it's a fun place. I love Star Trek, but it's a terrible place for a horror adventure because it doesn't seem like a place you can't really put yourself there. But I could be on Aliens, Nostromo, okay? And even though they're both spaceships, it seems more prosaic. When I played Call of Cthulhu, I set it in the modern era, not the 1920s, because it's easier for my players to put themselves in the modern era. If you're playing a fantasy world, then you have the challenge of making that fantasy world seem, frankly, less fantastical when you're doing a horror adventure. Make it seem more like a real place. And we'll get into some ways of doing that. But if the players are already used to your campaign, used to your world, used to your thing, and it's kind of settled into their bones, they know how it all is, then they will feel more like it's a prosaic place. And you guys running D&D or Pathfinder or whatever have a big advantage over the guys running Call of Cthulhu, because the guys playing Call of Cthulhu know they're going in for a horror experience, and your guys don't. So when you spring something terrifying on them, it's going to come out of left field, and that's really good. And they'll be used to the regular world they live in. Here's where we are. We're down here in Lankmar or whatever city of the judge's overlord, whatever it is. And then suddenly something really terrifying happens. That's good. But you want to play down the fantastical, play up the prosaic, and then bring in the horror. Okay? That's M.R. James taking. Now here's one way of playing up that, and here's a rule that is not from M.R. James that I use. I talk more about these in a video called 3 Rules to Make Your Horror Role-Playing Better. And this is another video I have called 1 Rule to Make Your Horror Role-Playing Better. And this is... Okay, now you can say the sarcophagus falls open and the mummy comes out. And that is visual. They get a visual image of a mummy coming out of a sarcophagus. But we can make this more real. We can say the sarcophagus clangs open or thuds open, and it scrapes out. Now they're getting a sound in their head, not just an image. You can add smell, right? The air fills with bitter spices. Like you can, okay, and you can have more. The air grows chill. You can taste bitterness in the air. You can use all the senses. Okay, now you don't really have to. What I have found is that 3 senses is kind of a magic number, and at that point, the thing feels pretty real to the players if you're using 3 senses. I mean, sight is kind of a gimme, but you don't even have to use sight. You can just say, the air grows chill, the thumping of your heart starts, your pounds in your ears, a dull ache goes across your head, because temperature and pain are different senses. And they seem different in people's minds. So, an acrid taste is right, or sickly sweet. And sickly sweet could either be sound, smell, or but you see what I'm saying. Use senses. The more senses you use, your roll. Now, I'm not saying you should read off a paragraph of description whenever a monster comes, but when there's something you want to be memorable, to have the players sit up and take note of, increase the number of senses beyond 1. Because the lazy GM will use just sight, but if you use more, and a lot of times for a horror thing especially, you don't want to lead with sight. You want to say there's heavy dragging footsteps in the corridor, and then they're like, this bad pounding on the door resonates through your bones. Now you got sound and feel. You get the idea? And then when they finally see the thing, you don't even have to describe it very much. And of course, we all know the over-description of a scary thing sometimes isn't effective. I mean, sometimes it works. Like, I think that Cthulhu is pretty great on the image we gave you. Plus, if you look at it, it's actually a fantasy Cthulhu, because look at the adventurers in the front. See them? They have a sword and stuff. And they just learned that all is lost because they didn't think Cthulhu was going to be so big. But and there's an eclipse of the moon, which makes it like, why is that happening? There's nothing good about an eclipse of the moon when Cthulhu's showing up. So there's some rules. Monster must be blind. Don't use game jargon. Set your adventure as prosaically as possible. So not on the moon, not in the lost land where wishes come true, right? Not somewhere seems more ordinary. And if you have him crawl into a dungeon, have it be the most prosaic dungeon until the things come, right? And then you have use 3, which that was awesome. Use 3 senses. The way I wrote it was the best way ever. And I don't have a eraser.
Yes, you do.
I say I don't.
You do have
I should know. I'm going to erase this. I'm not going to erase that, because that's awesome. I want you all to go to my website and see my stuff. Website that earns 0 money for me, it's only for your benefit. Also on the website, there's a thing about why I don't play in the 1920s, and it's for I want things to seem real to the players idea, right? But like I said, you have the advantage, they've been playing in your campaign, presumably. They're used to it being a medievalish fantasy world, so like elves or dwarfs will seem prosaic to them, which is good. Okay, now, but I would say not to use, if you have a bunch of guys brand new to role-playing gaming and it's not Call of Cthulhu, if it's D&D, I would say don't start them off with a horror scenario. Get them into the regular run of things first, and then go for something bad. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to build a horror scenario, and we're going to all do it together. And the first thing is, I think of things very cinematically, I would say. I start off with an image. So what I want first is a scene. Okay, now the scene could be from a movie, it could be a book, could be from a comic or an anime, just a scene. It doesn't have to be even a horror-related one. Like last year, they picked the Velveteen Rabbit. Okay, we made a great scenario out of that. So I want someone to, quick like a bunny, stick up their hand. Okay, give me a scene. Doesn't have to be horror-related at all, but it could be.
Sure. Dock workers doing some late night fishing.
Is that from a movie or a book or a
Oh,
Pre-existing.
oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
pre-existing scene? So we have baggage. Got one in the back here. You filled me. I'll get you back. I'll back to you later.
Tom Hanks waking up on the island in that one where he
Castaway.
crashed.
Castaway.
Castaway. Where he's a castaway. I should have been able to think of that.
Okay, I'm a little disadvantaged because I haven't seen that movie. Okay, I only see like horrible, sleazy horror movies, like The Shrine and stuff. But I know about Castaway. I know that he wakes up on the island. What happens when he wakes up? Just so I know. I've seen the scene where his plane blows up.
He finds a bunch of junk that's been swept up in the FedEx
It's all
plane.
from the FedEx.
Yeah, he's stuck there.
Well, I know he's stuck there, but what does he do when he sees the junk? Is he crying? Is he like
Collects it.
trying to collect it? He's immediately trying to survive.
Yeah.
He's Robert. Okay, that's fine. Okay, Castaway. Got the scene. Excellent. Now, we want a location. Does not have to be connected to the scene. So, like, don't pick Desert Island. Okay, the location could be in a Zeppelin, at a lighthouse, on the moon. At like, I mean, I did say that don't do things on the moon for the thing, but whatever. There's a location that's odd, and I'm gonna pick you for a location. What's an exciting place? Last year it was a hot spring spot in Iceland, but this will be fantasy, so probably not in
I
Iceland.
was gonna say Glacier National Park.
Glaciers.
Whoa.
Glaciers and mountains. Okay. And now, I'm going to call upon the girl who looks most like one of my granddaughters, and you're going to give me a monster or an enemy.
Giant bunny.
A giant bunny. Boy, that's going to be tough to turn into a scary monster.
He's ordinary, Robin.
I shouldn't have picked the girl that looked like her granddaughter. Just trying to be me. Okay. Now, this is what we're starting with. Yeah, that was so scary. So the scariest part about Night Olympus was me was the fact that the scriptwriter thought that running an electric charge through a train tracks, the single most grounded thing in the entire universe, would ever electrocute anybody, let alone a herd of giant rabbits. Like, that guy knew nothing about electricity. I'm sure that guy's dead by now, killed by his own wiring, right? Because they electrify train tracks, and you think that'll kill the bunnies. It's like, you can't, like, train tracks, like, you can't get more grounded than train tracks, you know?
Can the giant bunny have like the Ebola virus or something?
We are going to talk, look, here's the thing. We're starting with this.
Yeah.
I didn't reject the bunny, you notice.
You can do a lot with a bunny.
But importantly, we don't have to end with the bunny, because we can say, you know what, this scene is going more towards a giant weasel or something. Instead, we don't have to. All this can change. We just have to have a starting point to conjure with, to get our ideas. So we got a party of adventurers. Every game you have the issue of how do you get these guys to the place. Okay? And boy, do we have a solution, because we started with Castaway, and we have to find some way that our players are cast away somewhere. And they're stuck there and have to figure out a way to get out. Okay? So let's consider this. And we're going to work on it together. You have suggestions to make up. So how can we cast away the players? We don't have airplanes. It's a fantasy world. Yes, sir.
Dimension door gone awry.
A dimension door gone awry. Well, we could use that. I'm hoping to do something more prosaic if I can, but I'll use dimension door if I got it.
Shipping boat runs aground.
A ship could run aground. In fact, my new scenario coming up in October, Ghoul Island, uses that very concept where they have a shipwreck and they're cast upon the shore of an island. It's not a desert island, though. It has like a city and stuff on it.
How about
And
settlers,
ghouls.
settlers caught in a snowstorm or something?
Yeah.
Well, are your players settlers?
Could be.
Well, they're
It
trying to
seems unlikely.
They could be hired as guards to.
They could be hired as guards. Are you the kind of players that hire as guards?
Just like
My players might be looting the caravan.
Titanic analog.
Yeah, they could be on a boat and it crashes.
Some kind of avalanche trap zone as they're traveling through the mountains.
An avalanche sounds good because it means they're trapped. So what stimulates your players to go somewhere in the game? And I'm gonna call on Mike. Loot. So when you want your players to go to a place, you say, boy, there's a lot of money up there.
Something heroic, someone in need, a quest.
Someone needs help. And we'll reward them for it. I kind of like the avalanche idea, though, because it tracks them and it's connected to glaciers. So all we need to do is think of a reason, and you know your players better than I do, so maybe I won't go down this rabbit hole anymore. Got the money in, see? And what we're going to do is the players have to go across a mountain range. All right? Oh, yes. Okay. But it's not a problem, because it's the middle of summer, so, it's not an issue. We're going to go across the mountain range, and on the other side of the mountain range, there is something desirable. And I don't care what it is, because the something desirable is what they're going to have in the next adventure after this one. They think they're going to the Golden City now, or the Fountain of Youth, or to inherit the dukedom or whatever, but they're really not. They're really just going to get caught by the avalanche. So screw those guys, right? So and in the big picture, they might eventually think that this is just a step on the way. The bigger picture, and maybe it will be, it doesn't matter, because horror scenarios also have the feature that the shorter and like punchier they are, like usually the better. Like let's face it, Stephen King's best novels aren't his 1,000-page tomes, right? It's the little ones, like the girl who liked Tom, the baseball guy, I can't think of it, or Christine, or like the shorter, like Lovecraft mostly just wrote, is it Tom Bradley, is that the guy? Yeah, anyway, Lovecraft wrote mostly short stories. His longest story was 130 pages. That was like, so because it's hard to hold terror over a long period. That's why horror shorts, are often better than horror movies. Horror shorts, right? So having a short horror thing, then they go back and then they inherit the dukedom or whatever, it's fine. So we're gonna have them go across the mountains, and I'm gonna have it set up because it's good to surprise them in the middle of summer. We're going to go across the mountains. There's too many of you to use the Pegasus Express because they cost a fortune. Those guys really gouge you. So we're just going to walk across the mountains. Not going to be a problem. Maybe they're escorting the caravan, and maybe you can even you can escort the caravan, because that way that has two advantages. One is it lets them think they're kind of double dipping. They're being paid as guards, plus they get to go across. Maybe it's their caravan. They're going to sell all the loot on the other side because no one there has whatever you're carrying across that's useful. And I have a stole of things in my mind always as useful things that people would want to buy that is totally not functional for players and adventurers. As an example, transparent wood. I have a place in my world where there's trees that are transparent, and you can think of how great that would be to have chunks of wood that are transparent, use them for windows or anything. They're really great, but they're not really very useful for players to fight monsters. So I can give them this amazing magic thing that's only good for selling, and that they don't feel cheated by, So that's an example of a kind of thing I would do. Rocks that glow brightly in the dark are useful, but not so much on adventures anyway. So they have their caravan, and the caravan has a function not only they can think they can double dip and get there, but also that if one of them gets killed, because it is a horror scenario after all, that there's replacement characters on that caravan for them. Okay? Plus, you can pull someone out of the caravan to be a bad guy for them. So they are in the mountains, and they're getting way high, and up there, and now I'm thinking, what's the name of the mountain in the Lord of the Rings that you can't cross? Not in the Misty Mountains. You know, they have to go through Moria instead because it was so hard to go across the mountain.
It's the Misty Mountains.
It is the Misty Mountains, but that specific mountain had a name. It wasn't Moria. Moria is the dungeons. Doesn't matter. It's Lord of the Rings scene going across the mountain. It's really hard to get. So, but notice that suddenly it gets harder when it shouldn't be. So that's what's going to happen. It's going to it's a snowstorm in July. Snowstorm. We got to hole up. We're holing up. It keeps getting colder, and there is an avalanche. And we're going to play off this ice somehow into the horror. So now they're stranded in the mountains. Scene 1. Stranded in the mountains. I mean, there's things before it, right? They're cut off and there's an avalanche, and something's wrong because there shouldn't be an avalanche in July in the mountains, right? That's because I don't think they're planning to go that high, but there is. So they got an avalanche and they're cut off. And another advantage of the caravan idea is the avalanche can be tumbling down and knocking their carts over and killing their animals, and maybe killing some people, and everything's all terrifying. And it's a kind of a prosaic enemy. They weren't attacked by a bunch of flying goblins, right? It's an avalanche. And we talked earlier, you guys weren't here, but we talked about having the horror being prosaic makes it punch home to the characters more. So in a fantasy world, you don't want to use really exotic things all the time. You want to have it be something that seems like real world. So they're trapped in the mountains, trapped on the island. It's cold. We got the glacier thing, and now how can we get out of this fix? We don't have the food truck was knocked down by the glaciers. You know, if you want to have interesting things, you can either have the struggles be a lot of adventures and skill rolls trying to get out of the avalanche, save things. You could have monsters in the avalanche, you know, as well for them to battle, you know, polar bears or whatever you have in your mountains. You can use your own judgment of what kind of ice monsters make the most sense. It wouldn't have to be too tough, just something to kind of give them something to worry about a little bit more. So they overcome the problems, they rescue things. Okay, we don't have food, the avalanche is here, the storm's still blowing, and having a storm is good because it's cold, that's feeling, it's windy and blowing, that's sound, and you can't see a thing. And not seeing a thing is still sight. So you got 3 senses, you're constantly going with them. And you can do things like, you walk so far, your fingers start getting numb. You're and then they start freaking out that they might have, maybe some of them can get a little bit of frostbite. You don't care if one of your players loses a toe, right? Or a little bit of an ear. Hey, you can survive that. There's a re-rolling spell somewhere. Maybe not in the mountains, but somewhere. And if they brought something really important to save their asses, then that can be destroyed in the avalanche too. You know, like the cleric with the resurrect spell. He bought it. You know, too bad. So we got him set in the mountains. And so now they are in Castaway. They're going through the stuff. What do we have left? Okay, and this is a really fun interactive thing for the players, because I've done something like this before, which is as they start thinking of things they might have, you're like, oh yeah, you can find that, and they'll think of things that they might have that you didn't think of. Do we have a tarp? You know, can we set up a tent? And you go, sure, and then they'll feel rewarded for their cleverness in thinking of making a shelter out of the tarp. They'll feel rewarded for saying, we can break up the broken wagon for firewood so we can be warm because there's no trees in this place. And the players love feeling smart. Okay. And you always want the players to blame something terrible on themselves, not thinking of it, not on you for being a mean GM. And since you just were like a super mean GM by avalanching them, you make sure that they... And also, for that matter, during the avalanche, while they're doing things, or fighting the polar bears, or trying to rescue the horses, making strength rolls, or calm animal rolls, or whatever, then you want to make sure that they feel like they've done things successfully to mitigate the disaster. The disaster's still big, but like, oh man, if you hadn't made those rolls, you know, you would have lost 2 more wagons. And they go, oh yeah, I saved the day. You know, and, right? So there it is. Stranded in the mountains. Castaway scene. Trying to find the stuff. We got to get it together. We got to do our thing. And now what? Well, they can't go back. They can't go forward. They have to go around. And here is where, now I got the glaciers coming up. Because, obviously, what they have to do is go up and go across the glacier, I think. Because that puts them actually on the glacier. And glaciers are really great places for a horror scenario, because all your players have seen The Thing by John Carpenter, and there's these crevices that go down 100 yards, and maybe she hasn't seen it, but it's scary. Your dad might let you see the original Howard Hawks thing from the 50s, which is also really good, actually, and focuses on the cold. Although it's in the Arctic instead of the Antarctic, but who cares? And it doesn't have Kurt Russell, but you know, what the heck. It does have Chuck Connors. He plays the monster. It's pretty scary. Everything outside, he's trying to destroy the heating units, you know, and he's not hurt by the cold. Unlike the thing in Carpenter's, this thing doesn't care about the cold, if you've ever seen it. So we have stranded in the mountains, we have the glaciers. They got to get up and go across the glaciers. And glaciers are inherently scary because glaciers make noises. They groan, they creak, they're creepy, you know, and you can't see the crevice right in front of you, and sometimes there's snow covering it. You walk up and there's 2 inches of snow, and you fall 100 feet into the bottom of the glacier, and how are they ever going to get you out? Well, maybe they have a levitate spell, but maybe they don't, and they can't see you, they cast it on you. So it's really scary. And there's probably something bad in the glaciers. And I would say that the percent chance of this is 100, because you're doing this now. There's going to be something really bad in the glaciers. And I'm getting all this, I didn't come up with these scenes, right? You guys did these, but it's working out as I start putting together. Now at this point, we're like, what can the things be? What are we going to get them with? And I'm thinking, I actually was about to discard the giant bunny idea, but then I realized I don't have to, because what we're doing is we're building up towards the bad reveal. It's always good to have a little mystery for the monster in a horror scenario. You can say you must kill the dragon to rescue the princess in a non-horror scenario. In a horror one, it's good to not know what it is for a while, and then like, oh my gosh, it's so horrible, it's so awful. So what we're going to do is we're going to be on the glacier. They're going to be starving, right? No food. There's only ice to eat, and like snow fleas, which are a real thing, but really you wouldn't eat them. They're like this big and they're black. So here's where the giant bunnies are going to come in, because I just thought of an idea. And the way the giant bunnies can actually be scary. You didn't think I could do it, could you? And here's how. They're on the glacier or nearby it, and you have not giant bunnies, you have big bunnies like this, okay, that the players can hunt and eat and get food. But at some point they're going to say, how are the rabbits this big? And then that's when they see the 2-foot centipede, okay? Or a crow fly by the size of an eagle, or something else enlarged. Because I'm thinking the enlarged idea is what we're going to go for here. And the bunnies will just be good at first. And you guys heard of the giant bunnies of these misty mountains? They go, no, I never heard of giant bunnies before. Something's enlarging things. And that's inherently creepy. Maybe not quite as creepy in a fantasy world as in Call of Cthulhu, but still, it's got its moments, especially as things have been prosaic up now. The bunnies are big. Yay? You know? The snow fleas are big. That's not quite as yay. You know? The ravens are big. That's even less yay. It's carried off the bunny's head. You know? And then, like, what else is big up here? And how much bigger do they get? So right now you have things that are enlarging. And I'm guessing, and what I'm saying is that my suggestion is that this is not like a species of giant bunnies. It's bunnies that are being enlarged. So occasionally they might even see a bunny the size of a Vita bug or something off in the distance, and they go, oh, something's getting really big. Well, what's going on here? Okay, and now I'm thinking about this growth thing, thanks to her suggestion. So let's work on what we can do with the growth to make it scarier. And I'm just talking to myself because this is, again, I talk this out in my head when I'm doing this scenario. Thinking, growth, how is growth scary? Well, the obvious prosaic way for growth to be scary is that there's something big that you don't want to be big. Like a cockroach. But there's another way to make growth scary, and it's a more horror-oriented way. And that's when the player wakes up and he's too big for his armor. Because they're being affected by it. They're not going to like that, right? Some of them might say, oh, cool, I'm not a dwarf anymore. But but in general, they're going to go, what's happening? Okay? Something else you could also do is so you could have some, what I'm saying is to be forced to not grow things. Then it's like going further than that, I'm saying it'd be cool to make it worse than just growing. What if as it grew, something else was happening? So it starts out being the big bunny, then it gets a bigger bunny. But what if as they get bigger, there's something else? Instead of fur, you start seeing scales on them. They get more squamous or chitin. What do we want to go with this? I'm thinking there's something that's growing everything towards its desired thing. Is it insect? Is it reptile? Is it ghostly? What is it? I'm asking you.
Tumors.
Tumors. Anyone else like tumors? Who votes for tumors? Who votes against tumors? Okay, tumors have the day. Okay, they're starting to grow tumors. Lumps are appearing around, and once if they've seen some of the tumors, they've lived for a while out there. Maybe they fought some big animals, like a big mink, or an ermine, I guess it would be in the snow. Maybe an Arctic wolf that's the size of a horse or something. They've had some cool fights. They're getting across the glaciers. They're avoiding the chasms. They're making skill rolls because not everything has to be a fight to get across the chasms. Maybe they had to rescue a guy at a crack, and then as the things get bigger, they start having these gross tumors. So like the giant wolf is like tumorous and diseased, eyes poking out of its head, and it's got like a thing, a canker sore on its lips. And then that means that when the player wakes up and he's too big for his britches, he's going to be really freaked out. He's not just going to say, "Oh, great, I get an extra point of size." He's going to like, "Uh-oh, where is this going?" And they're going to have two questions. They're going to have, the first question is, most important, is like, if I can get out of the mountains, will it stop? And there's no guarantee that it would, right? I mean, that's up to you, the game master. But I wouldn't have stopped. I have triggered, right? Another question is, and the other question is like, what is going on? What's doing this? So we have a need for another villain. We got giant bunnies taken care of, and they're doing something that's really creepy and scary to the players, right? Giant bunnies. Who would have thought it? What's doing this? What's behind it? It doesn't have to be sentient. I mean, it could be the easy lame answer is it's a demon lord doing it, and that's not necessarily a bad answer. Sometimes the easy lame answer works out fine, okay? But it could be a curse, or it could be a what?
Contagious. They ate the bunnies and they caught it.
Oh, the Matango fungus of terror answer, which you haven't seen. Matango fungus of terror. Great 60s Japanese horror sci-fi film. Almost as good as Gokei. Parasite from Hell. Which, how great is that name? But the thing is, if it's contagious, something's spreading the contagion. What has happened to make this a thing even? And how are the bunnies getting it? They don't eat bunnies.
Could be, what was the anthology with Stephen King? But it was a meteorite that
Oh, the meteor, yeah, from Creepshow.
Meteor shit.
Yeah, Creepshow, yeah.
Creepshow did it too.
Yeah.
Could be a meteor, yeah.
It'd be like a carnivorous plant or something. Wants to like get them big, so when it eats them, it's
When the carnivorous plant wants to eat the big things.
Yeah. What about the heart of a demon? It's just got sharded out. There's some left there, and it's corrupting the environment.
Maybe exposed after the avalanche.
Oh yeah. Well, no, the avalanche. Remember the cold. We have the cold. That's right. We have the cold to deal with. The unnatural cold came first. So if you want to discard the unnatural cold, We can do it. We can say, we have to get across in the winter. It's going to be tough, but we're going to do it. And then the avalanche is natural. But the giant bunnies still aren't. Do we want to do that, or do we want to make them go in the summer and have that, try to cook up cold with the mutation somehow? Who votes for the thing is, if you have too many different moving parts, it becomes harder to control. So all in favor of having the unnatural cold be unnatural, raise your hand. Okay, and all in favor of the unnatural cold actually just being during the winter? I guess we have more people going that way. Okay, so but those of you that like the unnatural cold, gotta keep it, right? So they're going across during the winter. It's cold. This means the avalanche could have exposed something. And that could have been what started it, which is why the bunnies are small at first. And also it's useful because as they go through the adventure, things keep getting worse and worse. The bunnies or whatever keeps getting bigger, the mink keep getting bigger, the wolves, and they get more and more diseased and horrible until at some point they're seeing big dead, like huge animals with like lumps. They can't even identify what they are anymore, just masses of tumors. And these tumors, I might have played too much Call of Cthulhu, but I think that the tumors spawn something eventually. It's like it's implanted things in them, it's growing them. This is right from the Lovecraft story, The Color Out of Space, where it's growing them. So it's growing them, and that's going to make the players really excited that they're getting bigger. Okay? It's growing new things, and something's going to come out of these tumors, obviously. And eventually they're gonna start seeing these things, okay, that were exposed by the avalanche from a meteor or a shattered demon's heart or an extra-dimensional gate or the mountain god who is now insane because no one's worshipped him for a million years because no one wants to live in the damn mountains. And this is what has caused these things. And so, well, we have a third monster, sort of. And the question is, what comes out of those spawning pods that they thought were tumors? Yes?
Someone mentioned plants earlier.
Plants!
I think that
Plants
that's
are coming
really
out.
Cool idea.
Yes. And plants seem odd for the ice. So I'm thinking these plants have to be odd. So I'm thinking if they're like blue or odd colored, so carnivorous plants. Oh, that do spores. Or seeds, and that's what's been planting in the animals in the first place, and they get bigger, but you can also eat a seed, just like you can eat an animal that has tapeworm cysts in it, which don't do that, and then you get tapeworms, okay? The life cycle, in fact, just make it easy. For those of you who did not have a sort of biological education like me, you got this? Can I erase some of this? Mm-hmm. Okay. And the reason I'm doing this is because knowing the life cycle is going to help you know what should happen during the adventure. So, here's what the life cycle of a tapeworm is. This is a carnivorous plant, I understand, but it has a life cycle. I may as well have the tapeworm one, because tapeworm was kind of interesting. So here we have tapeworm. Now, in our case, it's probably living outside the plant on its own doing things, eating stuff and things, right? But it fires its cysts into things. Now in real life what it does is it lays eggs and you crop them out. And then something touches the eggs, hits the eggs, eats grass that your poop was touching, and ingests the eggs. The eggs evert little heads, burrow through the wall of the intestines or stomach, go into the bloodstream, travel throughout the animal's body. Let's take an example of the beef tapeworm. You're out in the field taking care of your cows, and you have the call of nature, so you take care of it. Not thinking about it. The cow later on comes and eats a piece of grass that has an egg on it. Okay? Because you've got whatever. It doesn't have to. It's not eating the poop. It's just like there's some egg on it. You know. So now in the cow's bloodstream, there's tapeworm cysts. They travel all through the bloodstream until they lodge somewhere, and they go into the muscle, and they burrow in and they form a cyst. And the cysts are about the size of a BB. Okay, and they used to call this measly beef. If you cut up on a piece of beef and you had little pale dots in it, that was measly beef. Meant there was tapeworms in it. So cook it is what they would do because like you couldn't afford to throw away beef. Now, like the FDA would not put a stamp of approval. You wouldn't even get it, right? But so the cysts are in the meat. Then you, who quite properly only eat rare steak, eat the measly beef, and you swallow a cyst. What's your name?
Gage.
Gage. So Gage has cysts in his stomach now. Okay? The cyst now everts its head, hooks onto the wall of his small intestine, and starts growing segments and becomes a full tapeworm. And then when next time he's out in the field and he has a call of nature, the whole thing starts again. This is the cycle. Simple and straightforward. Goes through. So there's a host and there's a target thing. So you are the target thing because you ate the rabbits. The rabbits are a host. Okay. What it's trying to do is get into you or into a carnivore. And here's why I think. Because it needs an intelligent host for its ultimate form, so it can be as smart as possible. So it just wants the rabbits or dumb things like that, or centipedes, just enough to be eaten by something else. So the cysts might slow them down so the wolves can catch them, right? And then the wolf, and a wolf is smarter than a rabbit, so like you're better off there. And a human, wow, it loves having a human, because obviously when it bursts out of your head, it's got your brain power. And once these things reach full sapience, which they haven't been before, they've only had to be wolves and mink and stuff, you know? Now it can be human level intelligence. Now the world is threatened. And we have this cool plant, and I'm thinking that a weird blue plant that feeds off your brain and has a life cycle, it's gotta come from outer space or from another dimension. So I think that the avalanche exposed a meteor or a thing. And one of the cool things about having be a meteor or a gate that's exposed is that it could have been there centuries ago, so there can be legends of it that someone can vaguely remember that are disorder from the last time this happened, when like all life on the northern continent was wiped out, or whatever terrible thing resulted from it. Let's see, one last thing. Okay, we got time for the one last thing. We got 5 minutes. I've got another image in my head for this thing to complete its life cycle. Okay, which is, how did it get to your planet? And I got an idea for this based on a plant from space, because I riff on it. And I'm just using your ideas, which you will do the same when you're doing it. Now, I'm doing this whole thing, I'm doing most of the talking, and it's all taking place in about 30 minutes that we're doing it. And we're ending up with what I think is a pretty killer scenario for the players, okay? Now, normally I could take a lot more time to do it, and I wouldn't have to, right? So you may or may not think like, I'm not sure I can think as fast as Sandy on his feet. You don't have to think as fast as Sandy. You can sit down and take it a few hours, and you're going to come up with stuff better than mine in a half an hour, okay? But but again, I think in terms of movie cinema, has anyone seen the movie Gamera versus Legion?
Yeah.
Okay, so in Gamera versus Legion, these creatures come from outer space. I don't even worry about the creatures. What I worry about is that their reproductive cycle is they build a giant flower. Okay, and this flower like fills all the air around it with extra oxygen, tons of oxygen, to the point that when you light a cigarette lighter, it goes woof into the air. Okay, and all the oxygen. Then it opens up, and then it triggers an explosion, which is like nuclear-sized explosion, and it fires the giant seed off into space. And so in the movie, the reason you have to stop these things is because the creatures are actually attracted by electromagnetic waves. So they aren't even intelligent. They're setting up their giant flowers in cities. Each city's getting nukes in them by these monsters. So if we have these things, the ultimate goal is to set up the giant flowers and fire back over into space. So if the players fail or don't stop it at first, have to go back and find their way back home and get up an army, and they go back up, they can have the giant monster flower getting ready to erupt and blow up the mountains. That's kind of an exciting, cool. And you could even have a whole adventure where they're going inside the flowers' caverns and things, right? And meeting the explorer creatures there, the animals' tendrils, the little sub-animals, the parasites that live on the plant. Right? We haven't even gotten to that part. We don't have time to go into that part, but what a great adventure that would be. And that's all part of the same adventure, right? Where they've gone up there, they found this terrifying thing. If they can escape and save themselves. Maybe they can purge themselves of the giant size thing, maybe they can't, but they can get back. They fight the giant flower, they have an adventure inside the giant flower, it's full of monsters, and then all of this is just a lead into that adventure, remember a long time ago when they're going to cross the mountains and go and get the Dukum. And there we have a horror scenario, which I think is pretty good, that we really made together, okay, and that we put together. I spent the first 15 minutes talking about how to make your horror things better, then it's only a half an hour to do this scenario. And you could take longer, or I usually take longer actually myself. Mike, you're waving your hand.
Yeah, question. So I find with fantasy, horror is usually screwed up by magic. The players.
It can be.
And so how do you get around that?
It's not a problem. In this one, so I have a guy with magic. So I'm going to fireball the giant rabbit. No problem. Plenty more where it came from. Fireball the giant wolf. Not a problem. Hold monster the giant wolf. Eventually these things are starting to come out anyway. What spell is there that will stop you from being growing?
Greater restoration.
It's not really, what?
Greater restoration.
Greater, is that cures disease?
Yeah.
It's not really disease though.
Yeah.
It's like a pituitary gland malfunction, right? And what's it going to restore you? You can see that maybe that would work, maybe it wouldn't. It's up to you. You can say, well, you know, okay, it works, and then like you're no longer growing. The tumor stays where it is, or you can have us happen again. Remember, he still has to eat rabbits when he's up there. Eventually, things are going to run dry on him, and the monster itself from outer space may follow different natural laws. But the thing is, the point is that it's not one single guy that you can go to and drive a stake through his heart and you're saved. It's these plants that the seeds are all over, and there's hundreds of them. And even if you manage to get rid of every single seed in the party, there's wolves and there's Sherpas and there's people up there in the hills that are all being infected, and there's thousands of these things coming. What are we going to do? We have a war against them? And if you fight them, then the people that are fighting them are going to get infected. You're going to have even more of it. And at some point, it's beyond the point where you can cast 10,000 greater restorations and save the day, right? And so eventually it all boils down to the dungeon crawl through the giant plant with the plant monsters and parasites and giant aphids. Hey, remember we talked about aphids before the getting started? The killer aphids. There you go, because this plant has aphids, right? So that's our adventure. I hope you found things in there. If you don't want to use this adventure, you'll find elements of it and the way we developed it will work. And the key things are, I use a scene from a movie or a book that I like. I don't have to like the movie. I don't have to like the book. I have to like the scene. So I've gotten good scenes from movies that were terrible, just because that scene was good. And if I have time, I will tell you, which I don't. So next time. Okay. Any questions before we bail? It has been a pleasure. I hope it's been educational and useful. It was intended to kind of be a practicum to learn how to do the thing the right way. And now you'll see how I've done it.
Thank you.